Welcome to deck request number 7. I was requested by SnipiingFr3aK to make a deck profile video of my Chainburn deck. So here we go with Chainburn. As you might probably guess from the name, or if you know the deck already, it's obvious. It's effect damage and building up chains. Now, the whole idea is to use effect damage with cards like Magic Cylinder, Just Desserts, Secret Barrel, and Ceasefire. And there's more cards that can deal damage. But you want those cards to deal damage. But if you just throw your deck full of those cards and then Tremendous Fire, Meteor of Destruction, Destructor Revolution, Descoala, if you just put your deck full of all that, then once you've played your first hand, then you get the one card you get per turn from your normal draw is not going to be enough to keep you going for victory. So to make it more consistent, you want to get draws. And that's why I have Jar of Greed and the Legacy of Yatagarasu in this deck, to get more draws. And since they're trap cards, they can be chained to cards, and they can be chained to with other cards. And then I also have Accumulated Fortune. But I'll get into detail for those cards later. First off, in my main deck, I have 3 copies of Lava Golem. It's quite possible that the opponent has some really strong monsters. Let's say Stardust Dragon, or Wind Up Zen Mains, Gachi Gunzetsu, Judgment Dragon, Master Hyperion, and you can just keep on going with that list. But Lava Golem distributes 2 of the opponent's monsters, and then summons itself to the opponent's side of the field. The opponent is able to negate this with cards like Solemn Warning and Solemn Judgment, since it is an inherent summon, but the 2 monsters that were tributed are still gone. Now, the opponent might then have a 3000 attack power monster, but during each standby phase, the controller of Lava Golem takes 1000 points of damage, and that is quite helpful. And if you're able to combine that with stall cards like Swift Scarecrow, then they just take more damage. I have 2 copies of Metaion the Time Lord. If you don't control any monsters, you can normal summon it without tributes, and the idea is that you do that when the opponent does have monsters. You attack into that monster. But due to Metaion's effects, you don't take battle damage, Metaion isn't destroyed, but at the end of the battle phase that it attacked, or was attacked, all other monsters all other monsters on the field are returned to the hand, and 300 damage is inflicted for each card returned. And it's inflicted to your opponent. The unfortunate thing is that during the standby phase, even when Metaion is face down, you have to shuffle it back into your deck, but it is able to get rid of big monsters the opponent has, and it can deal some extra burn damage as well. I have 3 copies of Swift Scarecrow. If the opponent declares a direct attack, just discard it, and you're good. Yeah, discard it, you're good. You negate the attack and the battle phase, and you get another turn to play cards. I play this card over Battle Fader. Battle Fader summons itself, which gives you defense for 1 attack later on in the duel, but usually you don't want monsters on your field for Metaion, and then 1 attack isn't really too much if the opponent has the upper hand anyway. And the big reason why I run a Swift Scarecrow over Battle Fader is that Battle Fader can be stopped with Solemn Warning, and Swift Scarecrow cannot. And Swift Scarecrow is a quick effect, and because Battle Fader is a summoning effect next to the ending of the battle phase, Battle Fader is just a trigger. So, let's say you play that, but the opponent has Evolzar Dolka and wants to negate your effect, then you can't use another Battle Fader, but when you play Scarecrow and they negate it with Dolka, you can just play another Scarecrow, because it's a quick effect. I run 2 copies of Chain Strike. I would definitely run 3 if it were allowed, but it's semi-limited, so that's why I run 2. You can only activate it as Chain Link 2 or higher, so you need to chain it to something. But you really want it to be Chain Strike to be as high of a Chain Link as possible. As for every number of its chain link, so 1, 2, 3, 4, For every, it's like its chain link times 400 is the damage it deals. It's chain link times 400. So let's say it's chain link 4, then it's 4 times 400, you deal 1600 points of damage. Now you cannot activate this card if multiple cards or effects with the same name are in that chain. This also goes for accumulated fortune, but now here's a ruling that quite a lot of people understand. Once you, the moment you activate the card, Chain Strike is not yet in the chain. The moment you put your hand on the card to flip it over, or you take the card from your hand and want to play it on the field. The moment you pick it up from your hand, at that moment it is not part of the chain yet. So let's say the chain is Jar of Greed, second Jar of Greed, and then the third chain link is Chain Strike. Then Jar of Greed, Legacy of Yatagarasu, then Chain Strike. Then you can play a second Chain Strike, because at the moment of activation, there are no two cards of the same name yet in that chain, because it's Jar of Greed, Legacy, Chain Strike. There's no two cards of the same name there. So you can play Chain Strike. But after that, you cannot activate another Chain Strike or Accumulated Fortune, because at that moment, there are two cards of the same name in that chain. In this example, Chain Strike. I have 3 copies of 1 Day of Peace. It gets you a draw, and it stalls for time. You won't be able to deal any burn damage, or any damage at all, but the good thing is that the opponent cannot do so either, so you get another turn to stall and get some extra cards. 2 copies of Pot of Duality to search for the cards that I want. Accumulated Fortune, it lets you draw 2 cards as opposed to the 1 from Jar of Greed, but Accumulated Fortune can only be activated as chain link 4 or higher. So usually I keep the Jar of Greed. If I have Accumulated Fortune, then I'll usually keep my Jar of Greed and Legacy and Just Desserts or whatever until I can build up to the chain of Accumulated Fortune. And if possible, I'll do Accumulated Fortune and then Chain Strike after that as chain link 5 to 2000 damage, but that doesn't happen too often. But it is really cool if you can pull it off. Ceasefire, 1 copy because you can only do 1. All face-down monsters and all face-down defense monsters are flipped to face-up. Flip effects are not activated at that time, but it's flip effects that aren't activated. So if it's just a card that says, when this card is flipped face-up, like Snowman Eater over here, that's not a flip effect. It's an effect that activates when flipped face-up. It doesn't make it a flip effect. A flip effect is more like a Rico, Lightsworn Hunter, and Man-Eater Bug. Those cards don't activate, but Snowman Eater will activate. But yeah, after you flip them face up, you inflict 500 damage to your opponent for each effect monster on the field. And you don't just count the monsters that were flipped face up. All already face up effect monsters, whether in defense or attack position, are all counted. So let's say you have a Metaion yourself, and then the opponent has a face up Stardust Dragon, and they have a Rico Lightsworn Hunter face down. You play Ceasefire, Rico's flipped face up, and then there's 3 effect monsters on the field, so 1500 damage. I run 3 copies of Dimension Wall. When the opponent declares an attack, you can activate it, and you should activate it when you would take battle damage, because with Dimension Wall, your opponent takes the battle damage that you would have taken. So let's say they direct attack with let's go a Judgment Dragon, 3000 attack. You activate Dimension Wall, and the opponent takes 3000 damage instead, and that is very helpful. Not only do you not take the damage, the opponent does it instead. Now, Jar of Greed is here just to draw 1 card to get that extra draw in, to get that more consistency, and it helps building up a chain. Same for Legacy. It's pretty much the same as Jar of Greed, but in the odd chance that the opponent has a spirit monster on their field, you can draw 2 cards. Just Desserts, 500 points of damage for each monster the opponent has on their field, and that can be quite a lot of damage, especially if you combo it with Ojama Trio, because if you activate Just Desserts, and in a chain to that, activate Ojama Trio, then Ojama Trio resolves first. Special summons 3 Ojama tokens to the opponent's side of the field, and then Just Desserts then resolves as Chainlink 1, and then counts all monsters on the opponent's side of the field, which includes the tokens. So that's the 3 tokens, plus any monster they already had, let's say they have one monster before that. Ojama Trio makes 3 tokens, that's 4 monsters at 2000 damage. I have 2 copies of Magic Cylinder. Magic Cylinder negates the attack of an opponent's monster, and you inflict damage to the opponent equal to the attack power of the attacking monster. Now I am wondering why I have 2 Magic Cylinder and 3 Dimension Wall. Because in both cases the opponent takes damage instead of you. Well, it doesn't really... I was thinking, let's say I have a monster like Gene Warped Werewolf. 2000 attack power, and the opponent has a 2500 Stardust Dragon. If they attack Gene Warped Werewolf and you play Dimension Wall, the opponent takes 500, but you still lose your monster. In Magic Cylinder's case, the opponent takes 2500 and you keep your monster. So I'm gonna have to think about that if I want to replace like one Dimension Wall with a Magic Cylinder or something like that. But I don't really run any monsters that I want to keep on the field. Like, yeah, besides Metaion, that's the only one that I want to keep on my field. But that one won't be able to be destroyed by battle and won't take battle damage anyway. So, yeah. I have 3 copies of Reckless Greed to get some extra draws in besides Jar of Greed and Legacy and One Day. This one actually gets you 2 cards instead of the 1 from Jar of Greed and Legacy, but it does make you skip your next 2 draw phases. But the 2 extra draws that you get from Reckless Greed, they give you so many more options to play with, especially if you can just keep on drawing and playing and dealing damage. Those 2 draws, 2 draw phase skips, they don't really matter. You can just keep going with the extra options you have. Secret Barrel. It inflicts damage to your opponent equal to the total number of cards on your opponent's side of the field and in your opponent's hand. If your opponent has a strategy that quickly sends cards to their graveyard from their hand or their field, then they won't have many cards, and you may be able to deal 600, 800 points of damage. But if it's like more of a stall deck, or a deck that quickly summons a lot of monsters to the field, and then you activate Secret Barrel, you might be able to deal 1400, 1600, 1800, or even 2000 damage if the opponent has a lot of cards. So Secret Barrel can deal a lot of damage, especially because you're running partially stall with Metaion to Scarecrow and One Day. One Day even gets the opponent an extra draw. The opponent won't be able to deal any damage. Then you play Secret Barrel, and you can deal loads of damage. In the extra deck, well, I'm not actually going to Exceed, Synchro, or Fusion into anything. So the only really extra deck card that matters here in this deck is Chimeric Fortress Dragon. Barely ever do I see an opponent's deck with Cyber Dragon, and if they do run Cyber Dragon, it's usually not a machine deck. It's usually an Xyz deck with rank 5 monsters. Like my Gagaga OGK deck runs 2 Cyber Dragons. I know like cards with like new level 4 spellcaster that can be treated as level 5 when Xyzing. I can't remember its name right at the bat. I know it was like Astrodron or Esteldrone or something like that. Yeah, it was that in like translated from Japanese. But I never really see it in like Machina decks or Karakuri. But I do run 2 Cyber Dragons in my side deck just in case I face machine decks. I can use Cyber Dragon and then Chimeric Fortress Dragon, but since it's Chainburn, I will barely ever want to put Cyber Dragon in there. So I'm going to take one Cyber Dragon out and add a Twister. Because the only thing that you really need to be afraid of are cards that negate traps. Jinzo and Royal Decree. Jinzo, you barely ever see that. But Royal Decree, a good amount of people have that in their side decks. And with a deck which consists of 26 traps, which is over half of your deck, you really need to be afraid of Royal Decree, because it negates any traps. You can still chain 2 Royal Decree, but once it's resolved, you can't do anything. And with these cards, you cannot get rid of Royal Decree. But so you really need a lot of cards to get rid of Royal Decree. That is 3 MST, Heavy Storm, 3 times Twister, and Trap Eater. Because Trap Eater is a level 4 tuner, cannot be normal summoned as death, but it cannot be special summoned except by sending one face-up trap card the opponent controls to the graveyard. So that's Skill Drain or Royal Decree usually when you use this with. And in this deck, it's there for Royal Decree. And if I know the opponent is running a lot of special summons, then I might side in Maxi to get the extra draws in. But usually I'm fine with the cards I have in my deck, and I just need to be afraid of, as I said, Royal Decree. And I have a lot of these cards. I have one Darkhold to just destroy monsters if I want to, and then the one Cyber Dragon to use against the machine decks, but I haven't actually cited that into anything just yet myself. So guys, this was my Chain Burn deck. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Shining Freak, I hope you enjoyed this deck profile, that you learned something from it. If you want, copy this deck and try it out yourself. Make some necessary changes if you feel something should be changed to make it more competitive, or anything like that. But I'm going to see you guys in the next video. I hope you enjoyed this, and bye-bye.